And I'm going to be joined right now by the founder of founder of Boston Fashion Week, Jay. Jay, how you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks so much for joining us. So I want to give you a chance to give a more formalized introduction. So for the people that are both attending virtually as well as here as in person, do you mind giving a little bit deeper background on yourself?
Sure. I got started in fashion really young, and I worked in a lot of different parts of the industry. And then 28 years ago now, we started Boston Fashion Week here in Boston as a civic initiative to kind of build community and give access to the public, direct access to our design community, and vice versa. Give our design community an opportunity to connect with their audience, their customer base.
Perfect. And so this is kind of an interesting topic that we wanted to kind of highlight. It's the first time we've done something like this for Startup Boston Week, which was, a lot of the businesses and topics we discussed in previous iterations of this conference were focused on more streamlined, sustainable businesses over the course of the year, right? Didn't really have a lot of this kind of seasonality to it. Didn't have these big kind of roller coaster upturns and downturns. And so, the first thought for me when I brought you on was, well, fashion, right? Fashion's all about seasonality. And for someone who runs their own conference here in Boston, that's actually coming up in a few weeks, maybe talk to us about specifically from the conference side, kind of how you almost have to reinvigorate yourself and create a brand new company every single year because it's a brand new experience for your consumer base every year.
Right. Well, we don't really describe it as kind of an event or a conference or even a festival or anything like that, because we basically prompt the community to build events around this time of year. Basically, the week is the focus, and from the very beginning, that was one of the issues with the local fashion community, is that they weren't on people's radar because there wasn't a time where the press and buyers and the public could even knew that this was going on, and also bringing them together so that we understood that there was a lot of it going on. So but in terms of the nature of fashion and it being very cyclical, and thinking about doing every year something new, we realized that we needed to be flexible. We couldn't have a very rigid interpretation of what the week is going to be every year. We had to have what we really wanted to do was build a framework every year so that it has some structure, so that people could really put things on different days and different time slots. And then that's when we became more active in terms of producing things that we felt were not part of the mix. So we really engaged the community to step up, and not just the designers, but also leaders in the community, venues, things like that. We don't have the resources that a New York Fashion Week would have. So it really is about who in the community wants to step up and really participate and really support that pool of talent.
And you have all these different stakeholders involved. You have suppliers, you have other producers that are involved in the whole production of whatever you're building. How are you able to kind of get a cadence down with them that they can expect in the seasonality of something like this, as well as to get them to re-engage with the same fervor that you have every year?
I think the answer to that is time, because I would say the first 5 to 10 years, we were chasing everybody. And I remember kind of that year where all of a sudden, before, just after that fashion week had ended, we started to get inquiries about the following year. So like some of the best things that have happened, in terms of programming for the week have come out of people reaching out to us and us being, like a solid sort of stable place that they can connect and see if it's a good match to them, for them to participate. So unfortunately, I don't think that's something you can establish really quickly, because I think it was at least a good 10 years before I realized that now this was anticipated. We built a reputation over time. We're always going to be there, in the fall, and this is the opportunity for the design community to come together, but also to connect with their audience.
And I guess the ability to connect with the audience is obviously an advantage, connect in new ways. But
Yeah.
Why do you think that maybe sometimes this cyclical business like this, or cyclical event, again, you don't call it an event, but production like this is sometimes better than your typical predictable, stable, mainstream type of business or production?
Well, from a personal perspective, I've been doing this since I was 14 years old. Not Fashion Week, but been in fashion, and I have to say, after a while, it gets really tired. In terms of, if it doesn't feel fresh, it just feels like a rehash. So there, just by the nature of the industry, because in fact, most of us don't need another garment ever. Like, we could live off what we have in our closets right now for a long time, but fashion doesn't really sell clothes. It sells these fantasies and these opportunities to play and to show off and express yourself. So that has to, by nature, be kind of part of how we work. We have to realize that we need to listen to what the community wants, what they're paying attention to, and then also, lead them sometimes. Like, last year we really explored augmented reality, and that became the focus of the week. And that was something new to the design community as well as the public. And we were surprised by the engagement, because we wanted to add something to the mix that was unexpected, and educate that audience about this new way of consuming fashion.
So you and I got a chance to kind of connect for a long time last week, just to kind of get a sense of what we wanted to discuss. And one of the things you really want to emphasize with a cyclical idea like this was really take advantage of what we call the off season, right? And so,
Right.
What are some of the things that you enjoy doing that is both productive but a way for you to reset during an off season?
I mean, a lot of things. I mean, the first thing is giving yourself some downtime, to recharge, because I think, we don't want to kind of just jump right back on the wheel immediately. But then really think about your role in the community, and start to be a helper, basically. Like, ask yourself, what else? I pride myself in kind of really keeping in touch with everything that's happening in town. So, whether it be schools, whether it be, new designers, and try to be there and try to support other efforts. So for instance, there are a few other entities that do a week dedicated to style or fashion in the city. And we make it our kind of part of what we do to make sure we're supporting them. Because again, they're more niche, but we want to make sure that the community remains a community. It doesn't become competitive in a negative way, where people are trying to undercut each other. So that's one of the nice things, because we realize that, again, everybody has their audience, and if we can be this umbrella, then all those audiences come together, at certain points. Like, people will be exposed to all different things, and it just makes it a lot more interesting. But and that time is also really key to obviously we're preparing for the following year, but exploring things, exploring what's happening in, not just in fashion, but in other industries. For instance, the whole sort of tech and science side of it that we've been exploring the past couple of years has just opened up new doors, new opportunities for everyone involved. So, you can spend that time devoted to kind of research and development of ideas and testing things. Like, we'll do little test events throughout the summer. We have held over the years this event, for instance, called Open Runway in the Spring. And it's like an open call for designers, and anyone can play. And all of a sudden, we're discovering new talent. And that becomes an exciting thing to kind of fold into the mix in the fall, in kind of the more structured official week. So it's about keeping engaged throughout the year, and and making sure that we're more in touch with what people are asking for.
Now, are you finding you're able to kind of build anticipation even more kind of during these off-season cycles because you're able to try all these new things, try out new marketing techniques, meet new and inspiring designers, but having the ability to kind of have a larger ramp up, is that something that is exciting or is it more kind of onerous on you and your employees?
Um, most of the time, it's exciting. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I still am engaged. I'm still excited to do it. But obviously, there it is. Like this month, it's a little challenging. Like you always feel like did I bite off more than I can chew this year? Because you get ambitious, and but it always comes together. I mean, like we have to trust that it's going to come together because we've done our homework. We prepared, and then it's with any event. Right before you're just like have doubts and questions and all that kind of thing, and then. But as long as you've done your homework and prepared all year, it's going to happen. It's going to happen the way it's supposed to happen.
So I guess how do you deal with from a founder's perspective? How are you dealing with that internal anxiety and stress of, potentially everything's kind of relying on this one major piece and not kind of an extended period of time. So how can you deal with that internally, and also how can you deal with that with your volunteers or employees?
I think besides taking care of yourself, I think that's a big part of it. Very sort of holistic view of your part in things and making sure that you come to the table, rested, fed, ready to go. It's also about managing expectations. For instance, we're in Boston, New York's not far away. And, I remember the first few years, it was really stressful because everyone was comparing what we were doing here to what was happening in New York. And we just realized you have to be who you are and work with who you are able to work with and make the best of that. Because then the week for us is a true reflection of what our scene has to offer, the regional scene has to offer. So I think, we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. Like we don't want to be, saying, oh, we're going to be, the biggest show, in the country and things like that. When we know that we have a different sort of set of a different set of kind of elements to play with, here that's specific to Boston. When I first got the idea for Fashion Week, I had been covering New York Fashion Week, and that was kind of in its first few years as well. And I realized I wanted to do it here, but it had to be different. Like it could not have the same approach to dealing with the public that it had in New York. Here, people are not going to put up with being online, and being made to feel kind of like, oh, you can't come in. So we flipped it. We just said, okay, well, this is all about access. This is all about making the talent super accessible to the public, where they could actually meet them afterwards and talk to them and really have a real connection. Because the scale is different here, and I think it has to reflect, whatever we do has to reflect our community.
So then, I guess from the biggest drawback with the seasonal business or cyclicality is that because you are going to have that off cycle, you need a budget and plan specifically for that. Obviously, Boston Fashion Week is more volunteer driven. Most of the events are free, but as you think about fashion in general and your experience in it, how have you seen teams that you've been a part of offset that flux in revenue, offset that financial imbalance throughout the entire year?
I think it's about creating kind of a portfolio of a portfolio career or portfolio business where you understand what's happening at different times of the year. Like we have designers who design, who might teach a class, who who write columns. So it has to reflect. We can't be in Fashion Week mode all year, even for a designer. That's really not sustainable. So they have to think about a gig, doing costumes for a production. Again, as I mentioned, writing articles, and teaching, things like that, so that there is a real mix. You see that in bigger brands. There are designers, for instance, who design for Bergdorf Goodman, but then at the same time they're working on special projects with Target, or they're doing television spots and things like that. So it really has to be kind of more of that portfolio approach, where it's an assortment of things that you can keep sustainable throughout the year. You always have something keeping you going.
Now that makes sense from the internal team or the founder perspective. You have that side hustle, but I guess from maybe from an investor standpoint, even right, people that are obviously infusing a lot of cash into whether it's Boston Fashion Week or some of the other things you've done. How are you appeasing them, or how are you going into conversation with them, whether it's on an annual basis or for these one-off type of events, to keep them appeased, to keep them understanding of this is kind of how this industry works?
Right. Well, I mean, it's how our community works here. So, I don't want to say that that's for all, because Fashion Week in New York, for instance, has a lot of different factions, but they have a big machine that produces things, and it's a big money making machine. So, but here in Boston, we treat it like it's project based. So we invite people back, to say, oh, we're starting up again. Do you have an interest in participating this year? How would you like to participate in kind, sponsorship of something? But it's more a matter of making it, again, managing their expectations so that they know in advance that, oh, this is about the time of year, like in March, we're going to be reaching out and letting you know what's happening. And then hopefully engage them in participation again.
So when you think about the first iteration of Boston Fashion Week, even when you were going out and finding these partners and investors and volunteers, were they people that had already had ties to the industry itself and understood seasonality, or were they more agnostic and you knew they were just kind of rock stars in what they did?
Well, on the fashion side of it, they understood that's sort of aspect of the cycle. When it came to leaders in the community, it was a matter of educating them and letting them know that this was our focus at this time of year. So it's a great time to connect with the industry on also in a way that they're comfortable. We try to always make it, just an example, we've done events in early fashion weeks with like the Boston Public Library, their beautiful McKim building. And I remember, the first thing I asked, basically, instead of coming in with a design for what we wanted to do, first finding out what the parameters were, what are the rules, what are the limits? And then, we're designers, we can solve design challenges. That's one of the things we do. Just because the focus is initially fashion doesn't mean we can't apply it to everything. So that made us a really popular sort of entity to work with, because we never came in, like fashion has a reputation for, divas, and coming in demanding this and that and being really dramatic. I have to have this and that. And right away, we kind of tried to dispel that and just say, no. We wanted to make it work for you. So if you're keeping that audience in mind, whether it be the designers, the venues, the general public, how is it going to make you really happy with all the stuff we're doing? So then, because that we can deliver on, we can make sure that they don't have any issues with us, and that we are welcome again, the following year.
So I guess, how did you go about potentially finding those people that were quicker to understand and be educated on what the mission and goals were? Because there's probably a lot of founders out there right now that are watching or listening that are trying to figure out, well, I have this idea, whether it's fashion or again, has a seasonal aspect to it, that they might take it to the wrong people and then be discouraged from moving forward. So when you were thinking about your first iteration, are there resources or certain potential, whether it's type of investor groups or partners that you worked with right off the bat that immediately became a staple of whenever you were going to create the next one?
We were always kind of, we definitely went back to people we've worked with, who seemed like, again, they enjoyed it and wanted to return. But when it came to finding new entities, again, whether it be like venues or people, or possible sponsors and things like that, it was really again a reflection of the year and all that work we had done. Like we had worked with let's say with a school or with a restaurant on a little summer event or whatever it was, and then that's when they kind of rose up. Then we see, I very rarely cold call anybody. And if I do, I've done my homework like in a major way. Like I've found something that I think in my research that I think this would be a good match for, that would serve them, because that's always the thing. Like I think if you have that in mind always when you're, how is it going to help them, not so much help me, because just by virtue of them participating, that's helping me, the fact that they're stepping up. But if your goal is to figure out why should they do this, like you're their advocate almost, like you're saying, okay, well, why would they do this? What would be valuable to them? Like, what do they want to get out of it? And when there's any question, I actually ask that question, like, what do you want out of this? Why are you doing this? And because then I can make sure to, again, manage those expectations and make sure that we can deliver, and that, that there's a good chance that they're going to have a great experience.
That makes complete sense. The other flip side that we had talked about last week, which I know we wanted to highlight, was there's an advantage of kind of having an end date, right? So if you know that something is going to stop at some point, you have a chance to review, right, and well document your experiences and your learnings from it. Whereas in some businesses, it's a constant fire all the time, right? You're just continuously moving. And so maybe talk about, your experience on that back end after the fact.
Right. Well, when Fashion Week wraps up, when after that the week is up, I immediately start thinking about just general things like, targets in terms of dates. And that becomes act one, and I kind of break it up into 3 acts, that initial stage of, I'm exhausted. Do I want to do this again? That kind of thing. And just start to think about like what would work, what looks good, what worked this year. So just evaluating and kind of just creating a target for ourselves. And then that middle section, that act 2, is really about what we talked about earlier, all the things you do through the year, who, is there a new place that's opened up? Should we check it out? Should we talk to the people, involved? And just making those connections, because I think one of the other elements is, I personally don't want to work with anyone I don't have a relationship with, because there are too many wild cards. It's like I just don't know what to expect. So building a relationship over the year, whether it's engaging in a few calls, a site visit together, just to talk about, what would be cool. That whole second act is really important. And then the third act is just intense. It's just like it comes all together, and it's like that deadline that we can't play with. It's not like we can be, a couple of days late on an event. Like it has a definite, end date, and yeah, it's the most intense part, but it's also very exciting. Like when we wrap up each night of Fashion Week, there's something we can be proud of for that day. So, yeah.
Excellent. So I guess in a more in-depth or more detailed approach to that question is, are there certain resources or platforms that you've found are super valuable in your, as you call it, different phases as you're going through the year? Whether it's from a planning perspective, budgeting perspective, things that have been referred to you. I know it's different for every industry, but there is a clear kind of trend across cyclical businesses that we do want to try to identify.
I can't think of like a specific resource. I mean, do you mean in the sense of helping you planning, or?
Yeah, could be both. Could be actual technical, or it could be actual just a resource group, for that matter.
I honestly, I think we kind of serve that in that role for our community, because we're the people that our local community kind of checks in with throughout the year to, first, like find out the dates, find out if there are any venues that are interested in hosting their project. And then even in the planning, like, one of the things that I do in that middle time is help people, really create the best possible event and troubleshoot their ideas, so that they can go after what they want. But then, our, having so many years under our belt, we kind of know, we can anticipate what's going to go wrong, in a plan. And so we're kind of that we provide that service in what we do.
So as you're going through that kind of planning process, being that resource to all the other ancillary groups in the Boston area as it relates to the fashion industry, do you ever find that we've come across some founders that sometimes will feel that their idea goes stale, especially when they're trying to continue pushing it? With something like this, where you can redefine yourself every year, do you still come across that problem where maybe the idea you thought of in December and what you kind of want to pin to the top of your board and run with it all the way through to September, October, do you wind up losing steam on it in any way?
I wouldn't say we lose steam, but it evolves. Like, it's never quite, and that's one of the things that we had to get used to early on, was not being so attached to that idea. Like, definitely using it as this guidepost, like this, it's a target. But yeah, certain ideas you go, that's not looking like it's gonna kind of result in anything that people are going to connect with, over time. It seemed like a good idea. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it goes stale. It really kind of pivots. It really sort of all of a sudden, and I think it's because we're open to it, because it could, if we were really too attached to it, then it could go stale because we were stubborn about not shifting, and just saying, oh, no, well, that's the idea. Not so great now that we're in September, but we got to move forward with it. Luckily, one of the things about being cyclical is that we can be agile, right? Yep. We can, we have that flexibility where we go, nope, it's not working. We can let it go. And that's hard for a lot of people, because again, you're investing your creativity into things and your resources as well. But if you don't let go, like, we recently were having some technical issues, and I was already rethinking, how do we completely, shift out of this? Because I don't want a big mess on my hands, technical stuff. And I had already redesigned the week. Thankfully, it was all resolved just this morning. But but I mean, that's how close it is, And at first I was stressing out and panicking, but then I was like, no, just rethink. Like, what do we got in place? How can we move forward? Because you need to remind yourself to stick to your word, which is, to be flexible, to be a reflection of what's happening right now, and not let, what you think other people's expectations are kind of rule what, how you think about how you're going to take it on.
And that was kind of a great little segue there, because I did want to talk to you about the idea of tapping into trends, right? Because that's really what you're the best at. So how quickly you're able to shift from not just the idea, but keeping your potential end user, customer, whatever you want to call them, engage the point of the production of Boston Fashion Week, not letting it go stale, and making sure that trend is still relevant by that time, whether it's 8-9 months later after the idea first occurs. So Can you kind of talk to us about you and your team's efforts around your R&D work when developing the next kind of seasonal fair?
Well, it's a little different, because there's a misconception about that word trends. I'm not a big fan of the word trends, like, only because it's in the fashion industry, just, apparel wise, everybody, the selling point, like on, TV shows and stylists and things like that, is, oh, you have to have this latest trend. That's just the business machine, part of the industry that's telling you need to buy more. So for us, we, being kind of a student of fashion history, we realized that, for a long time now, there have really, there's no definitive trends. There are trends within communities. So as long as we're paying attention to that community and, offering them, what they're saying they want, then we hit the mark. Like we have shows, for instance, during the week that are student driven, that they might be niche, like a goth collection, or ladies who lunch suits, that kind of thing. So it's not like we try to I should say, to impose a trend or a theme on anyone. We come up with, again, this framework, and then let the framework be informed by where people are at, because we have designers who are doing sustainable collections. They're doing science and tech influenced fashion. So like I said, if you let it be a reflection, then it is the mix it's supposed to be for that particular season. And it takes so long. I mean, the year it seems like a long time, but it's a really short span for a designer to say they're going to do this, get the source their materials, get it made, photograph it, get it write copy for promoting an event, put an event together. It's already in the season at that point. So it happens really fast, even though it seems like a year is a long time.
Yeah. I do want to ask, and I don't know if we talked about this last week or not, but I have to ask. So when you think of Boston fashion in general, what is your candid opinion of the fast fashion chains that are out there, like the Zaras and the H&Ms of the world?
I think there's a lot of bad stuff happening in the world, in terms of sustainability and in protecting the planet. I think it's almost unfair to kind of trash the fast fashion right away. Yes, we need to change, but we were sold a bill of goods when it came to fast fashion. Fast fashion was billed as the democratization of fashion. Like, anyone could have great style at an affordable price. So it's gonna, as long as it took to get everyone, wanting that, that $10 dress because it's such a great price, it's going to take a while to re-educate our consumers. And there is a pushback to fast fashion, which is slow fashion. And this is, people making things custom for people, and they have to wait 3 months for something, sometimes. So, but people are starting to recognize that is an investment, that it's fun to anticipate it, that it's custom made for your body. So I think it is changing. It's definitely not changing fast enough for a lot of people. And I definitely agree that it has to change. But I just hate to kind of throw everybody under the bus when the industry itself, kind of sold this to us and got us all hooked, on that easy, quick fashion. And then now all of a sudden we're all bad guys. Now, granted, we have to change, that's a given, but we got to do it at a pace that is real, because we can all pretend to be sustainable, but to be truly sustainable in shopping and just your lifestyle, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of education, and we just need to be open to that and move in that direction.
That was, I don't know if there was a president of fashion, but that was a true political answer. That was great. That was great. So I think there's a lot of people in the room here, as well as online, who might have some questions for you. So I'm going to open up for some audience Q&A. If you are virtual and have some questions, please post them in the Q&A tab in the top right-hand corner of the Goldcast portal. But wanted to see if anyone in the room had a question to start. No? Crickets? Oh, yeah. That way people can hear you at home.
I'm curious, what has been the impact of the event, like now that fashion is sort of struggling with inclusivity and trying to make a broader audience? Like, how have you adapted to that?
Really, I mean, from our perspective, is being open to change, but I really have to give credit to our community of designers, and not just the designers, but industry professionals like modeling agencies, hair and makeup, all of photographers, fashion editors, because that has all been a part of the conversation for them. So we're very fortunate to have, again, a very sort of socially conscious community that is speaking to those things, that it's important to them. So I definitely can't take credit. I mean, credit for, bringing that together, because I think it's on everybody's radar. I mean, and as a teacher, I work with students, and we don't have to teach them to think that way. They come in thinking that way and demanding that of us, that as teachers, we're speaking to those issues. But I think, I was just looking at what we have going on for this year, and I'm just so impressed with how many issues and ideas are being explored through the programming that we've got this year.
I guess, Jay, to kind of complement that, is that something that not only that you're involving in Boston Fashion Week itself, but are you seeing that become a bigger issue as it relates to things like the supply chain that you work with, other resources that you take advantage of, this idea around, obviously it's a major piece outward facingly, but I'm wondering what those conversations are like behind closed doors with the team itself, and how you make sure you adhere to that both internally and externally.
It gets a little tricky because, I think when you initially, at least for a while, when people were trying to do the right thing, so to speak, in terms of their business, make the right choices, it was prohibitive initially for a lot of people to kind of switch gears, because just like what we talked about with fast fashion, there was so much built in, in terms of how we do business, that it was really hard to make a stand and kind of do things in a different way. But I think that's changing. I think the last, 5 to 10 years, there's been a real shift, because I remember, just thinking about sustainable practices, that became an issue because you could do sustainable clothes, but at the time there was very little you could do. Like for instance, the range of fabrics you could use was very limited, so everything ended up looking a little generic. So diehard, sustainable fans of sustainability would buy into it, but fashion by nature was about the beautiful artifact, the garment or something special about it. So it took time for the movement of sustainability, that kind of thinking, to catch up with the aesthetics as well, because it was just people were wanting to buy it sustainable, but it was like not terribly pretty or very basic. And but then now that's all changed. So I think that's changing now, because there's more available, and also more customers are asking for it. But it's important to note that they're not buying sustainable fashion because it's sustainable. They're buying fashion because it's pretty, or they like it, or they can express themselves in a certain way. Sustainability is like saying, is basically this one other layer that's going to make it a more valuable investment for them. That they're saying, oh, okay, well, I'm doing something good as well. That my purchase is not hurting the planet in some way.
So when did that shift kind of occur, right? Because for a long time, that was a selling point for a lot of things, right? It was this idea of sustainability. It was custom made or socially consciously made, and so that was a piece that brands really ran on for a long time. So when did that switch where now it's back to it has to look good, and plus it's socially made, socially responsibly made?
I think that when we initially started hearing about sustainability, it was a trend. It was a novel thing to say about your work. But one of the issues with that too was greenwashing. Like, when all of a sudden we knew that it was a good buzzword for marketing and we wanted to use it to sell stuff. So, but I think that has changed because people more and more are getting called out on greenwashing. And again, the important part is sustainability should never have been a trend. It shouldn't be a novelty or a selling point. A selling point, yes, but not, again, like a marketing piece. That should just be folded in, like saying it's made well, it fits well, and it's sustainable.
I do have a couple questions that came in through the portal. So this one, not this particular session specific, but these sessions will become available down the road. It takes the operations team a few weeks to get them up and running to be videos you can share with the community. So for your friend who is interested in this portal that wasn't able to make it, who wants to be in the fashion business, yes, this will be available to her later on. And then we do have another question here. I'm going to put up on the screen from Fernando. So I'm not that fashion savvy, as you can see. So I'm not sure what Shein is, but maybe you do, Jay.
Online fast fashion. Yeah.
Okay. So now that Shein is getting more popular and democratizing the access to fashion, how do you see the future of sustainability in fashion while being environmentally aware?
Well, I mean, I can just speak to like my students. Um, Last year, Shein was like this hot new thing. Everyone was excited about shopping on it, and all of a sudden this year, people are kind of flipping on that. The narrative is flipping. It's like, oh, yeah, it's fat. I mean, it's fast. It's inexpensive. But again, I'm hearing more and more of my students who are kind of that next gen of consumers and creatives start to shy away from things because, again, I think it's a lot of it is because, especially in the school environment, these issues come up. There's always someone, at least one person, if not like half the class, who from who this is an issue. So all of a sudden, this next generation is exposed to it, and then they start questioning their choices. Because of course, if you're talking to a teen or early 20s, affordability is huge, and looking nice is huge, but when they start to see alternatives and see the reasons why they shouldn't, that starts to change. So I can't argue that Shein isn't like huge, but again, it's getting called out on a regular basis, and again, the next generation of consumers is really seeing what it actually is, beyond a quick fix for fashion.
Yeah, actually, that someone made a comment in the chat area where I'm not sure if you were familiar with what Patagonia just did.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that was huge.
So, yeah, do you want to kind of explain for those that might not be aware?
Yeah, the owner basically turned his company over to a trust where all their profits will help address climate change. And I mean, they have always been leaders in the community for that. But I mean, that is just so huge, because they are such an international brand, and they're making a real statement, and they're putting their money where their mouth is, actually. It's like, and I think that is a really like one of those role model moments where, I mean, you may not be doing that in your business, but it's definitely a challenge to step up and do better.
So I guess with Patagonia kind of being that leading the charge, so to speak, do you expect to see other brands in the fashion industry kind of follow suit at all, or?
Well, probably not as extreme as that. I mean, that's a big thing. But more in terms of inspiring people, I mean, to see the value of it. I mean, and they're brands that, again, have beautiful fashion content, and like Stella McCartney. And Stella McCartney is known for beautiful clothes, but then the other thing is that she's a leader in sustainability, so that she is always trying to find new ways to give us great fashion, but making sure that she's addressed everything she can to make sure that it's sustainable. So I think more and more leaders like that are kind of rising up and showing us this is a way. Because that's the other thing, is that you can't really kind of copy what another brand is doing. You really need to find how you want to be sustainable, because it's virtually impossible to be, zero carbon footprint, but you can do what you can do. So it's about, assessing your business and then figuring out how can you incorporate sustainability into your practice.
I just you mentioned this idea around the copying within the fashion industry. So are you seeing that with the bigger players like an Amazon, for instance, duplicating or replicating kind of these SMB shop owners' fashion items? How can, maybe as you think about it, those smaller shops fight back in a way, right? Because the best way for them to sell oftentimes is on the Amazon store, right? So how can they compete against it?
You can't compete with something like that. That's kind of a category all its own. You could only really compete with that if you were a similar, had similar structure. I mean, and this speaks to something we talked about as well which is, you can't use as a role model or as a model for your business a company that has resources or advantages that you do not, because then it's a really unfair fight. So I think it's about really assessing what you're able to do at this given moment. And again, who is the right audience for that? Because yes, we all want to build our companies and scale up. But we need to do that once that first level, that the first level we built is sound, because then we have something to build on. We can't, I think there's a real temptation to want to rush, and I want to be out there competing with the big guys, and I have had students who work an entire semester on a gown, right? So they spent, a good 3 to 4 months working on something. So they want to charge for that gown, $5,000. And I'm saying, yes, with the amount of time you put into that, yeah, I could see you wanting to charge that. But why would I buy a gown from you when I could buy a gown for $5,000 from Armani? So, it's like you have to figure out how it works, like where you fit. And then you can build up from there. You can say, I definitely want to reach that upper level, but one step at a time, and say, build it, make sure it's a solid foundation, and that you've got a good customer base, and then go from there. Even if that customer base is small, but let it be what it is. And then once it's feels really secure, that's when you build. And it's slower than a lot of people want to hear. But it is a really kind of strong way to kind of define your success, because then you can enjoy your success as you go, rather than waiting to make $1 million.
So that actually brings me back to the localized level here, where if you look at the history of Boston Fashion Week to date, how has it really empowered a lot of the local fashion designers and their maybe smaller shops or retail arms?
Well, I think Fashion Week in a lot of ways is this big lab. It's a big lab in terms of trying things out and experimenting. And people have really, some people have moved on and built bigger businesses. Some people have begun to go to other cities, around the world, and explore their careers that way. It hasn't been like one particular strategy for a lot of people. I think the thing about Fashion Week is that it gives them an opportunity to get feedback, share their work. And again, because it's a community, it isn't just customer feedback, but feedback from their peers, and also support from their peers, because that's an important part of what happens during the week. So, but yeah, we've had a lot of success stories, and again, in all different levels. Designers go on to do big collections. Some have small businesses and keep it that way, but again, live a really nice lifestyle, throughout the year. And then you get people where Fashion Week becomes a bit of a reality check, where they go, oh, you know what, this isn't for me. And they might find another way to be in fashion, because I think that's another thing with fashion. Everybody thinks about being the fashion designer or the model, and that's the industry. But there are just so many ways into the industry that can really speak to what your talents are and your temperament and just what you'd enjoy.
Excellent. So I've been talking too much. Does anyone else in the audience here have any questions for Jay at all? If not, I do have some more that I can ask him. We have about 10 minutes left. All right, no problem. So Jay, I guess as it relates, continuing with Fashion Week in and of itself, you talked about how people could, at the very beginning of this entire panel, that someone could live out the rest of their life with the clothes they have in their closet right now, right? So as someone involved in an industry that tries to fight against that in a way, right, to have people keep coming back to the table, how is it that fashion, in your eyes, is able to market that idea of you need this new thing, you need this next best thing? Nothing wrong with your old thing because you bought that from us last year, so we keep that too, but keep kind of growing your closet. I guess, how is the marketing arm of fashion in general pushing the effects of the seasonality of a business like that?
Well, in general, the industry as a whole, I think it does that a little too well. Again, we like it used to be that 4 times a year there were new clothes in the stores for you to buy your fall clothes, your spring clothes. Now, now retail is a recreational sport. So, you actually make dates to go shopping, not necessarily with the intent of buying anything, but it's an activity. So I think the fashion industry from the retail perspective have become entertainers, and giving you that fun little lift with a new garment. And it's I think the only way it's going to change is to really have the customer be educated. Like educate the customer in terms of saying, yeah, you can do that, but what do you really need? What do you want to add to the mix? And I have got to say too, I'm in the I'm training the next generation of designers, so I know that sustainability. We don't to get more fabric and make another garment. That's not necessary. That's technically a negative thing, but we have to make the argument for the importance of aesthetics and for people being able to express themselves. I definitely I'm not a big shopper, but I'm definitely every once in a while find things that um, help me express myself, that make me feel like, oh, this is fresh, this is new. That's a very natural thing. So it's really just about finding a balance there, and saying, but being aware that you need to find a balance. Because again, a lot of people are kind of being led around saying, following the trends and what they talk about on the morning shows or the reality TV shows, and just following blindly. And I think we just need to take a step back and take control of that, and then we can play. Because I think the industry is about play. It's about, again, entertainment, about self-expression. So that's one of the things I love about it. That it's fun, but I think it just got a little carried away with itself in terms of, selling at a level that is not sustainable.
All right, my last 2 questions here. So one, can you give me a breakdown of all the young founders out there, or the prospective founders that are listing in? What do they need in their business repertoire clothing to push forward? And whether it's for investor meetings, whether it's for partner meetings, customer, whatever, what have you, that are pretty agnostic across verticals. I know it's a bigger question, but your kind of top 3 or 4 articles they need.
Clothing wise, for me, I can only speak for myself in terms of how I dress for different situations. If I'm dealing with business, it's a really well-tailored jacket, because you can throw that on over like a nice dress shirt or a t-shirt and it will look as good. So this is where investment shopping comes in handy. It's not just about grabbing any old blazer. And if you do, the other thing a lot of people don't realize is you might find a great buy on an old blazer. on a vintage blazer, or even a blazer, a generic size. But go to a tailor, have it fit to you, so that that alone will just give you a very sharp edge in terms of how people will respond to you visually. The other thing is shoes. Now, I'm a big fan of comfortable shoes. I'm in sneakers almost all the time. But I've also invested in just great classics, a cap toe shoe, a wingtip shoe, really simple stuff, because again, you could be wearing jeans and a t-shirt, but a great shoe is kind of a sign of quality, when it comes to a look. And then there's the grooming and accessories. You don't have to have super expensive, watches or anything, even though I know those are kind of a status symbol. I'm a Timex guy, because from when I was a kid, that was my first watch. So I have a collection of them, all different color bands, and that's my little accessory. And then grooming, making sure you've got a great barber or hairstylist, and because that again is showing that you really have that sense of respect for not just yourself, but the person you're interacting with. You've made that, and then you can still be comfortable. There's to give a little plug to one of our local businesses, I was just reading about the new trend, after all these lockdowns and everything, for work leisure. That's a new category now. And, nobody does that better than Ministry of Supply. And, because they have these great cuts, traditional, workwear, but it's all got flex and comfort. So you can ride your bike to a meeting and still look great when you get off your bike. So I think that's the advice I would give in terms of showing up for stuff. That would be really impressive.
Sorry, what was it? Ministry of
Supply.
I'm gonna go. Ministry of
Yeah,
Supply.
they're this great company that started with these two guys at MIT, and
Okay.
it's they even work with NASA. I mean, it's the fabrics are all performance fabrics, but the clothes really classic. You look like you were going to work.
And then last question is, how can people attend, be involved in, meet you at Boston Fashion Week?
Well, this year it starts October 8th at the we're collaborating with Cambridge Science Festival to open the week on their Fashion Day, right next to the new MIT Museum in the MIT Kendall Open Space, and that's going to be our kickoff. And then every day, there will be, I think the listings go up in about a week or so. There'll be different in-person events, some online content. And then again, we're returning with AR galleries, augmented reality galleries, dropped every day during the week in different public spaces so people can check them out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay.
Sure.
Everyone, Jay Calderon, thank you so much.
Thank you.